What's up guys, Lifting here. In this video I'm going to present what is in my opinion the top 5 most powerful totem skills that you can build around in Path of Exile. And please note that the order of which each skill is presented is not necessarily indicative of its power. Also, I have linked a build guide to each of these totem skills, look them up in the description of the video. Number 1 on the list is Warchief Totems. Not only do these totems have a high damage multiplier, but they also effectively scale the damage output based on your equipped weapon, meaning that unlike spell-based totems, their ceiling cap is much higher. A well-balanced Warchief Totem build should be able to take on the hardest content in the game as long as you have a good weapon. A typical 5-linked Warchief Totem setup is something like this. Warchief Totem, faster attacks, melee physical damage, increased area of effect, and added fire damage. As a 6th option you can add in weapon elemental damage. Typical endgame weapons for Warchief Totems is Facebreakers, Hesmana's Bloodlust, the Maroi Urkimol, or of course some really well-rolled rare weapons if you can find them. Number 2 on the list is one of my personal favorites. It is Siege Ballista Totems, which similar to the Warchief Totems also scale off the weapons damage and affixes, giving it a very high power ceiling level. Siege Ballista Totems have awesome range on their projectiles, meaning that they will often be killing monsters even off screen, to both joy but also frustration, as when your loot filter sound indicates something has dropped, you have no idea where to look, so yeah. The last time I used Siege Ballistas, I went as an elemental focused Inquisitor and used the following skill gem setup. Siege Ballista, faster attacks, lesser multiple projectiles, weapon elemental damage and increased critical strikes. I used this setup with the Doomfletcher's Prism Bow and the Rain of Splinters Jewel to get extra projectiles, and it was more than capable of doing tier 14 and tier 15 maps including bosses. That said, there are multiple other ways of scaling the damage of the Siege Ballista skill gem. Some go physical based, some use the Iron Commander Bow, which allows you to summon multiple ballistas depending on the amount of dexterity your character has, and some other people are probably doing something very different as well. There's multiple ways of going about this. Number 3 on the list is Shockwave Totems, which, unlike Siege Ballista and Warchief Totems, doesn't scale its damage based off its weapon. Shockwave Totem is a spell-based totem, meaning that every time it levels up it gets a massive increase in damage and is not as reliant on a good weapon unlike the Siege Ballista and Warchief Totem, so it can be easier to get up and running. Although it is a spell, it still deals physical damage, and it is best scaled this way or by having the physical damage converted to elemental damage. Furthermore, people typically play it as a crit build because the skill tree just makes more sense that way. My latest Shockwave Totem build focused on crit and converted a big part of the physical damage into lightning damage while also using added fire damage together with auras. This together with the Inquisitor Ascendancy class provides a massive elemental DPS boost that allows you to bypass enemy elemental resistances. It is very powerful. The skill gem setup I used for this was Shockwave Totem, faster casting, increased area of effect, physical to lightning, increased critical strikes and added fire damage. But as I said, you can also entirely focus on just pumping up the physical damage alone if you prefer. With this setup you should be able to clear most red maps, but you might struggle a bit with some of the bosses. That said, they should all be doable as long as you know how to play your character and have optimized gear for the level of the zone. Typically a Shockwave Totem build will rely on items such as the Divinarius Dagger, a Carcass Jack, or even the Beast for a Shawl chest piece if you are energy shield based. That said, there is of course many other ways of approaching the gearing of a Shockwave Totem build. It entirely depends on how you build it. Number 4 on the list is Bladefall Totems. Basically this build works by linking the Bladefall active skill gem to a spell totem. After doing so, your totems will now start to cast this spell. Bladefall Totems have great AoE, great damage scaling, and they are cheap to get up and running. Bladefall is a physical based spell similar to Shockwave Totem. Actually, most Shockwave and Bladefall Totem builds really aren't that different in their setup. A typical gem setup for Bladefall Totems include Bladefall, Spell Totem, Concentrated Effect, Controlled Destruction, faster casting, added fire damage, or a high leveled Empower that works as well, although it is much more expensive and much rarer of course. Bladefall Totems can clear any type of map, although at the very end maps the damage starts to fall off slightly. It shouldn't be an issue though, you will still be able to do anything with it, and it is very cheap to get going. Now, as the 5th and final entry on the list, we have Righteous Fire Totems. one of my favorite type of totems, and not only does this totem setup deal massive amounts of damage, but the totems also has great area of effect, and it is just in general a very different approach from other more traditional totem setups. The interesting part to Righteous Fire Totem is that in order to scale the damage of the totems, you can among other things do it by increasing the life of the totems. Similar to how Righteous Fire works, if cast by your own character, the more life or energy shield you have, the more damage Righteous Fire deals. So it's a pretty interesting mechanic. Furthermore, people typically play this on the Chieftain Ascendancy class, as he has that specific note that prevents totems from taking fire damage, thus preventing the totems from degenning or dealing damage to themselves. Typical uniques used for this type of build is yet another Carcass Jack, the Troll Timber Shield for increases to AoE, Doriani's Scepter for a nice damage boost, or even the more controversial Soul Mantle, which allows you to summon a third totem, gives the totems 50% more life, and because of that more damage, remember, but with the downside of every time one of your totems gets destroyed, a level 20 curse will be applied to your character, thus making it a risky choice. This was the top 5 totem builds for 2.4 or Atlas of Worlds. Before we leave though, I should give an honorable mention to the dual Flame Totem Marauder Blood Magic build. This build may not have the same very endgame potential that the other ones can provide, but it is incredibly safe and very cheap to get going, making it a perfect league starter, magic finder or beginner's build that can take you most of the way into high mid-tier maps before it starts to slow down, and even from there you can continue. It will just be a little slower. Now, if you guys are interested in trying out any of these totem skills and are looking for a build guide, remember I said that you can find it in the description of the video. I hope this was of use. Subscribe for more Path of Exile content. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?